Greetings, one and all, once again to Exploring Arda, a Tolkien-centered podcast where I'm your host, Jackson. And although my show kind of revolves around everything except for Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and the reading of books, I thought for a Halloween-centered episode, I wanted to talk about some creepy stuff that Tolkien has invented and put into his stories. Excuse me, and I think it just kind of like fits the vibe, I suppose, of Halloween and the spooky season and stuff like that. So I put together like a short three list. I don't know. I can't really think of the word for it, but basically I'm going to be talking about 3 things that Tolkien has created that is pretty creepy, in my opinion, and fits the vibe of October and anything creepy, I suppose. And I know that there's plenty more out there that he's made that is considered like dark fantasy and like grimdark and things like that. But I think just like for this setting itself, I guess you'll see when I start talking about it. But yeah, it's just pretty much the 3 things that I think of when it comes to Halloween that Tolkien created that kind of fits the bill. So, and if I seem like I'm reading off a script, it's because I am. I made my own 3 entities / characters, I suppose, and I'll just pretty much be reading what I wrote. So once again, I'm just reading what I have in front of me, so hopefully it seems at least decently in tune. So, without further ado, I'm going to be going on with my list here. So, the first one on my list is the Barrow-wights in the Lord of the Rings. So, I know that I tend to kind of stray away from Lord of the Rings and The Hobbit and whatnot, but I thought it would be best to include these entities because they're definitely very creepy in one of the chapters, and they're very dark in general, I would say. Because Barrow-wights are basically like evil spirits sent from the Witch King of Angmar to possess the dead bones in the Barrow Downs, kind of like by where the Dunedain always remained, and the Witch King pretty much sent them there so that they wanted to protect against that land. And it's, yeah, it would make sense for like the Witch King to like try to defend its own land, but through dead spirits. It's pretty cool. So, because they're actually presented as like these like shadow entities with like a pale light gleaming from within, and it could be their eyes, which is probably is their eyes. And their thin skeletal like hands have a freezing cold touch, and they capture their victims, and it holds them in place, and it kind of like paralyzes them for their strange and definitely creepy rituals. But not only this, but they speak in like these like deep hollow voices to lure their victims like into the grounds, into the Barrow Downs itself. And the cool thing is Tolkien includes like a sort of like dark poem to kind of go along with their vibe as well. And I wrote it down here, so I'm going to try to recite it here. So it says here, "Cold be hand and heart and bone, and cold be sleep under stone. Never more to wake on stony bed, never till the sun fails and the moon is dead. In the black wind the stars shall die, and still be gold here let them lie, till the Dark Lord lifts his hand over dead sea and withered land." Really cool stuff. I even though it's like rhyming, to and fro and stuff like that, it's a really cool dark poem where pretty much all hope is diminishing. It's fading away, and if you get captured by them, then it's the end. So it's yeah, it's really cool and dark and shadowy. I like it. But in Fellowship of the Ring, the first book of Lord of the Rings, when it's Frodo, Samwise, Merry, and Pippin are all pretty much captured by these Barrow-wights when they venture through the old forest and come upon the Barrow Downs, and they're nearly sacrificed to the Barrow-wights spell, to their incantation. They're under that spell. But if not for the calling of Tom Bombadil with the desperate cries of Frodo Baggins, each hobbit is basically laying down, unconscious, with swords across their necks, and the place is basically filled with like this ominous green light. The Barrow-wights finish their incantation when a long hand and arm just kind of creeps into place to finish the job. Frodo kind of wakes up in a way from this sort of daze, and he hacks away at it with his best strength, hacking away at the arm before he calls out to Tom Bombadil, and pretty much Tom shows up and saves the day. But I think the creepiest part of it is that it's just like one arm and hand, just kind of like long and pale, that outreaches to kill the hobbits, which hobbits are like the most peaceful people on earth. So, and then Tom uses this own sort of like creative exorcism to banish the Barrow-wights for the time being, and then the hobbits get swords from Tom himself to like defend themselves from then on. Tom takes all the treasure and the gold and all that stuff, and he scatters it across the hills and the land so that no wight could ever return there again. And I think this is an interesting thing revolving around wights that I don't normally go back to like in first thought. It's like just because it's these Barrow-wights are terrifying evil spirits made of old bones, like possessed old bones, but can capture and kill beings with ease. So that alone is pretty scary. But however, with the banishing spell, I suppose if you know it, and the scattering of ancient relics, they're gone from that place for a long time. But then I started thinking about it again, a second time, and Tom Bombadil's magic and he himself, I suppose, like Tom himself, are very ancient. So perhaps like the Barrow-wights are something so big and something to be afraid of if Tom has to intervene and save the day. So that's my first one for the list, is the Barrow-wights. Very, very cool and interesting and dark and scary. So second on my list is actually kind of a combination of Sauron and a pair of his servants called Drogluin and Thuring-Wethel. This particular version of Sauron is when he is confronted with Beren and Luthien, so in that chapter alone. And he was in control of Tol-in-Gaurhoth, or the Isle of Werewolves. So it once belonged to Finrod Felagund, you might know the name. Sauron's forces pretty much overtook this place, and Sauron began breeding wolves. And not just this, but he actually began pretty much possessing these wolves with like evil spirits. Therefore, Isle of Werewolves was, crafted, formed, whatever, But also in this particular time of Sauron, after he did the whole breeding of wolves and stuff, it is the quest of Beren and Luthien that Sauron takes multiple forms when he tries to escape during a ferocious battle. But before this happens, Sauron had actually sent the sire of Tol-in-Gaurhoth, a werewolf named Drogluin, to kill them. But Huan, the Hound of Valinor, was successful in the fight. In the Silmarillion, the book, it says that, quote here, Then Sauron sent Drogluin, a dread beast, old and evil, lord and sire of the werewolves of Angband. His might was great, and the battle of Huan and Drogluin was long and fierce. Yet at length Drogluin escaped, and fleeing back into the tower, he died before Sauron's feet. So soon after Drogluin's defeat, Sauron actually goes out in wolf form, which I imagine is massive and terrifying and not something that a lot of people would stand up and fight to. But because like for me, I always picture an enormous like dire wolf chasing down its victims in like a dark forest or in like the shadows of the mountains or something really cool, like some dark theme to it. But however, when Sauron attacks them, Huan comes in to save the day. Because Sauron thinks that since he knows what Huan is, who is supposed to be like this Hound of Valinor that only dies when he fights like the worst, pretty much Hound of Hell, pretty much. And so Sauron thinks like, oh, that's me. So so he turns into his wolf form. But however, it says also later in the chapter, quote here again. Then Sauron shifted shape. There you go. From wolf to serpent, and from monster to his own accustomed form. But he could not elude the grip of Huan without forsaking his body utterly. Ere his foul spirit left his dark house, Luthien came to him and said that he should be stripped of his raiment of flesh, and his ghost be sent quaking back to Morgoth. So it's definitely a power scene to really kind of read through and just kind of picture in your mind. And like the imagery of the fight itself is probably like really obviously like intense between Huan and Sauron in wolf form. So it's really cool. But one thing that I kind of wished to have more of I suppose in the original text of the Silmarillion, was the messenger of Sauron called Thurin-Withel. So she took the form of a giant flying bat and flew across Angband for Sauron. It's assumed that she was slain by Huan during the quest for the Silmaril, only because this is, I think it's just because Luthien takes the form of a giant bat when they go to confront Morgoth, which is really cool when you think of a giant bat and also a wolf next to her. It's really cool when they go and try to capture the Silmaril from Morgoth. But she appears this way in front of Carcharoth, which is, obviously the Hellhound who guards Thangorajim and whatnot. So it only makes sense that Luthien takes this form of Thurin-Wethel because it's something that they recognize and see all the time. But I just really wish that there was more of that, because it really gives that whole dark sense about it. But maybe, I don't know. I forget that if it's in Beren and Luthien the book, because I still have to reread it, but possibly. So, finally, third on my list, of course, is the dreaded entity of Ungoliant. So, I've done a singular episode of Ungoliant, and that was a while back, I think. But I'm still going to add her to the list. If you do want to go back and listen to it, you can. But if not, then I'm just going to kind of retrace my steps and kind of add a few things here and there. So we first get introduced to Ungoliant's ravaging hunger of light when Melkor decides to ally himself with her, but rather for more of bargaining and a dark trade. So basically, if Ungoliant would help Melkor destroy the trees of Valinor and lay waste to their lands, she would also get the chance to devour pretty much any source of light in her path, as well as the plunder of Melkor's hands, which he later actually turns back on when he gets the Silmarils. So this is tragic for Ungoliant, because she's always starving, and what she eats is literally anything that's divine or light or anything dedicated to Iluvatar or the Valar, or anything kind of so to say. In chapter 8, there's a really great description of what she's kind of all about. So here's our next quote. In a ravine she lived, and took shape as a spider of monstrous form, weaving her black webs in a cleft of the mountains. There she sucked up all light that she could find, and spun it forth again in dark nets of strangling gloom, until no light more could come to her abode, and she was famished. So she's basically a being of complete darkness and evil. So it's no wonder that Melkor is terrified of her. I would say terrified because he's very wary when he confronts her and whatnot. But because when you go all the way back there, Ungoliant's origin is it's really mysterious and kind of unknown, and it's that fact that kind of intrigues me to her continually. So still in chapter 8 later on, it says, quote, "The Eldar knew not whence she came, but some have said that in ages long before she descended from the darkness that lies about Arda, when Melkor first looked down in envy upon the kingdom of Manwë, and in the beginning she was one of those that he corrupted to his service." So I'm close to thinking that Ungoliant is actually one of those fallen Maiar who turned evil, but this was before Melkor's marring of Arda, but still after Melkor's discord. The Eldar may have thought it was during Melkor's time and he's the one who turned her and he corrupted her, and this is just me, this is my personal opinion. I think I should probably go deeper into it, but I think that she might have been this dark entity even before Melkor knew of her. It might even be possible that during Melkor's discord that Ungoliant was born out of defiance of Eru Iluvatar and without Melkor's knowledge. Of course, if it goes the other way, spins the other way, where Melkor did, pretty much possess her to the evil side, it is still out of defiance of Iluvatar. So, but for me, I think that theory that it could be possible, because by the time Melkor meets Ungoliant, she's already this huge colossus entity that takes the form of an enormous giant spider, eating all the light that she can and spewing forth terrible smog and poison. So it takes time to make that horrifying, beast. I guess you could say a beast. I don't know. And it's enough to frighten Melkor, or, Morgoth, Blackfoe of the world and whatnot. So, so then we can cut over to when Ungoliant pretty much eats the light of the trees of Valinor once Melkor stabs them and poisons them to the point where they, decay and die. Before the slaying of the trees, Ungoliant weaves a certain web called Unlight around her and Melkor. The book explains it really well of this, of the distinct traits. There you go. Quote here. A cloak of darkness she wove about them when Melkor and Ungoliant set forth, an unlight in which things seemed to be no more, and which eyes could not pierce, for it was void. So it's an interesting thing to have literally a web of invisibility, but it only makes sense since Melkor wanted to, sneak into Valinor. And along with that, you'd think that with all the light of these trees covering all of Valinor and a little bit beyond would satisfy any dark creature or entity, but apparently when it comes to Ungoliant, it's still not enough. So now this can drag into the topic of why Ungoliant wanted to pair with Melkor in the first place. And she became an ally of sorts, but only because he promised so much light to devour that it would get her full, but obviously it didn't happen because of the theft of the Silmarils, and she wanted those to eat instead. So Ungoliant was already there when Melkor decided to make allies with her. So what I'm saying, I guess, to kind of conclude that thing, is that I think there are entities that aren't necessarily paired with the whole theme of dark overlord, trying to take over the world, trope. Sometimes I think that there are creatures, like in fantasy and fiction, creatures, entities, beasts, and the like, that kind of simply exist and survive because they thrive on the darkness itself. And if there's a chance to expand this kind of darkness over the light, they'll take it, because that's kind of how they prolong their existence. And this happens with Ungoliant. But when she doesn't get enough light to devour, it's rumored that she went into the deep chasms and tunnels of the world and ate herself to death. It's absolutely horrifying to really think about it, but she is, I consider, to be the darkest entity of Arda, at least, for me. And even after that, her smog and vapors caused the living and lush environments of Valinor, to wilt and twist and decay in a dark fashion, after she left. And even when she dies, it comes to the region of Gorgoroth. The elves who venture there, they never want to return again. Their minds and thoughts become, kind of twisted and hallucinated and all that stuff. And not just that, but the waters are poisoned and the creatures are all scary and dark. So, and it really is. It's horrifying and scary to think that even after Ungoliant's death, she still causes havoc and despair. So, that's kind of my whole spiel on Ungoliant and all the other entities and creatures and whatnot that I think are kind of spooky and creepy. And yeah, that's pretty much it. And I know this was kind of a shorter episode, but I wanted it to be kind of in the theme of Halloween and dark stuff and in spooky season. So I think I did decent. If you would like to add another, creepy or dark entity, just kind of right below in the comments. I would like to see what you guys kind of, come up with, besides the 3 of the ones that I came up with. And like I said, there's plenty more out there. I just think this fits the vibe of the month. So I appreciate all the listens and the views. It's really fun. It's a really fun project of mine. I am trying to finish the Silmarillion by the end of the year, and I'm going to say try, because there's still a lot more to go, but hopefully I can finish by the end of the year, and hopefully I make my 1-year mark, and that is January 2nd when I first started this podcast, so that's coming up. Don't know what I'm going to do, but hopefully I finish the Silmarillion, and then I know exactly what to do. So yeah, and obviously if you haven't checked it out yet, I always have to do this because I am an author. Check out my book called The Lands of Ordia. See if I can get it without the glare. Yeah, there you go. The Lands of Ordia. It is available on Amazon. I would appreciate it if you guys checked it out and got a copy, and let me know what you think about it, because I worked very hard on it. So yeah. With that all being said, just stay tuned for the next episode. And may the light of Elbereth be with you all. Farewell.